January 5th, 2025, 2039. All right, class, settle down. I know you're all here for the juicy stuff. And no, this isn't your run-of-the-mill born here, starred there, Hollywood tale. No, ma'am. This is the winding, sometimes awkward, often hilarious, but always mesmerizing journey of a kid named Timmy. Yes, that Timmy, who clawed his way from a tiny New York apartment to the very peak of the cinematic Olympus. So sit tight. Grab your coffee. We're diving in. Now picture it. Hell's Kitchen, late 90s. Not the hipster haven it is today, but gritty, loud, and always 2 steps away from a rat fight in the alley. And in a cramped 5th-floor walk-up with creaky floors and an eternally leaky faucet, little Timothée Chalamet came into the world. You better believe his middle name was already fancier than my entire education. How like Shakespearean royalty. Yeah, this kid was born with drama in his bones. His mom, Nicole, was a Broadway dancer who could still do pirouettes while holding a crying baby and a bag of groceries. His dad, Mark, had that French coolness, worked for UNICEF, translated big political documents, and always smelled faintly of espresso and diplomacy. The household was bilingual, multicultural, and just chaotic enough to shape a future actor's mind. Now, Timmy didn't start out with Hollywood dreams. Nah. When he was 5, his biggest ambition was to become a professional soccer player, or a Power Ranger. He spent hours running around the apartment in a red onesie with a colander on his head, declaring war on invisible villains while his mother tried not to trip over him. But even back then, there was something different about him. You ever see a kid rehearse their own imaginary Oscar speech while brushing their teeth? He did that. Every night. I'd like to thank the Academy and my toothbrush for always being there. And he meant it. The first time he stepped on stage was at his elementary school's Thanksgiving play. He was supposed to be a tree. One line. The harvest is here. Simple enough, right? But not for Timmy. He showed up in full costume, leaves, roots, a squirrel puppet, and delivered the line like he was Daniel Day-Lewis at the Globe Theater. Parents cried. Teachers clapped. One mom tried to sign him to a talent agency on the spot. The kid stole the show, and he knew it. And then came LaGuardia. Oh, LaGuardia High. The school for the arts. Known as the famed school, where future stars get molded. And Timmy? He was rejected. Yeah, I know. The drama. But hold on, it gets better. His drama teacher marched into the admissions office the next day and said, "You either take him, or I quit." Boom. Timmy was in. Sometimes, fate needs a little help from a fed-up teacher with a flair for the dramatic. At LaGuardia, he was electric. He played MC in cabaret with so much gusto, a Broadway scout allegedly muttered, "Who the hell is that kid?" during intermission. He'd show up to rehearsals quoting Rilke, writing music, and asking absurdly profound questions like, "Do you think grief and desire are linked by the same chord?" Mind you, this was a 16-year-old who still couldn't remember to bring his own lunch. But don't get me wrong, he wasn't a saint. Timmy was weird. He once dyed his hair silver for artistic clarity. He made short films with sock puppets where they discussed Sartre. And he had a massive teenage crush on statistics. Yes, math. No one knows why. He would randomly recite population densities during warm-ups. The other kids thought he was possessed. But oh, how he could act. He booked gigs here and there, some commercials, a spot on Law and Order, because every New York actor does one, and a weird short film where he played a homeless magician who only conjured regret. Don't ask. His big break was on the horizon. But before we get to that, let's pause here. Take a breath. Because the next chapter? That's where Timothy goes from teenage theater geek to international heartthrob, with more twists than a Christopher Nolan plot. January 5th, 2025, 2040. So, where were we? Right, Timmy at LaGuardia, making waves with his sock puppet existential crises and eyebrow-raising performances. He was a prodigy with the heart of a poet and the energy of a caffeinated squirrel. But despite the buzz around him, fame didn't just fall into his lap. Nah, this isn't that so Raven. This is real life. After graduation, he did what many hopefuls do. He enrolled in Columbia University. Because, he wanted to have a real education. Cultural anthropology, no less. The kid could have picked any major, but he chose the one that would let him analyze the socio-political significance of yams if necessary. It wasn't a bad idea, except Columbia turned out to be stifling. Imagine taking your first-year finals while secretly juggling auditions, writing monologues on napkins during econ class, and crashing on your sister's couch in Brooklyn because your dorm roommate won't stop practicing the trumpet at 2 a.m. Eventually, Timmy cracked. He transferred to NYU's Gallatin School, where he could design his own curriculum. Basically, he turned his education into a choose-your-own-adventure novel. Courses like Melancholy in Modern Media and the Political Economy of Art House Films. It was there, in the cramped seminar rooms and overpriced coffee shops near Washington Square Park, that Timmy became something rare, an intentional actor. One who wasn't just chasing the spotlight, but asking why the spotlight was even there. Then came Call Me By Your Name. And oh boy, this is where things get spicy. Now, most people don't get their breakout role by flying to Italy to film a slow-burning romantic drama opposite Armie Hammer, and a peach. But Timmy did. The casting director said he walked into the room with this intense, fragile energy, like a porcelain teacup filled with dynamite. He didn't audition. He confessed. That's how it each. But Timmy did. The casting director said he walked into the room with this intense, fragile energy, like a porcelain teacup filled with dynamite. He didn't audition. He confessed. That's how it felt. Filming in Italy changed him. He learned to play piano. He learned to speak Italian. Well, sort of. He biked through sun-drenched vineyards in the mornings and cried into scripts at night. There's a story, unconfirmed, but too good not to mention, that during a dinner scene, he improvised a line so heartbreaking that the entire crew forgot to cut. They just watched him, like a museum piece come to life. And then came Sundance. Then Berlin. Then the Oscars. Timothy walked that red carpet in a sleek white tux, looking like Gatsby's more brooding nephew. He didn't win, but he didn't need to. He became the youngest nominee for Best Actor in nearly 80 years, and the world noticed. Suddenly, he was everywhere. Vogue covers, late-night talk shows, awkwardly charming interviews where he fumbled with microphones and said things like, "Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm just trying not to explode." But the fame hit hard. There was a time, right after Call Me By Your Name, when he took the subway in a hoodie, and someone still recognized him. Not from his face, from his voice. "You're that peach guy," the fan shouted. He never rode the subway again. Now, most people would ride that wave straight to superhero franchises and multi-million-dollar deals. But not our Timmy. He zigged when others zagged. He took roles in Lady Bird and Beautiful Boy, playing addicts and intellectuals, weirdos and wallflowers. His characters weren't glamorous. They were raw, haunted, human. But don't get it twisted. He still had his quirks. On the set of Beautiful Boy, he insisted on journaling in character. Filled 2 notebooks. One for his character's thoughts, one for his character's dreams. When asked why, he said, "Because addicts don't just lose themselves in life. They lose themselves in sleep too." Everyone on set just blinked. And somewhere in there, between moody performances and chaotic award speeches, Timmy became a style icon. Not the try-hard kind. No, his red carpet outfits were a genre of their own. Velvet suits, sparkly harnesses, lace shirts with no buttons. One time, he wore a satin suit that made him look like a 19th century vampire who just came back from Coachella. Macola, January 5th, 2025, 2040. And people ate it up. But fame isn't all silk and fan mail. There were tabloids, rumors, internet weirdos photoshopping his face onto frogs. The pressure mounted. People expected him to be profound 24/7. And while he could monologue with the best of them, sometimes the kid just wanted to eat a bagel in peace. He retreated, took a break, spent time with his mom, went back to France, read Proust, grew a questionable mustache. And then came the sand, the spice. Dune. Macola, January 5th, 2025, 2049. The casting call for Dune came in like a whisper. One of those industry rumors that makes its way through espresso-stained scripts and agents' offices in Beverly Hills. Denis Villeneuve, yes, that Villeneuve, the man who made spaceships feel like emotional trauma, was helming a new adaptation of Frank Herbert's sci-fi masterpiece. A story about politics, power, and interstellar sand. Lots and lots of sand. And who did Denis have his eye on for the messianic role of Paul Atreides? That's right, our boy Timmy. Now, on paper, it was a gamble. Up until that point, Timothy had been the prince of indie cinema. He could cry like a waterfall and deliver monologues about inner darkness while wearing suspenders. But Paul Atreides? That was epic. That was starships and prophecy and knife fights on alien planets. Could the guy who once wept into a peach carry a blockbuster? Denis thought so. When asked why he cast Timmy, he said, "Because he looks like someone who's dreaming of the future, but haunted by the past." That's not a director. That's a poet with a camera. So Timmy flew out to Jordan. That's where they shot a lot of the Arrakis scenes, deep in the desert, surrounded by endless dunes and the hum of sandstorms. And let me tell you, this wasn't some green screen romp. This was real. As real as 120-degree heat, sand in your shoes, and boiling in a still suit for 12 hours straight can get. There's a story from the set. One morning, before sunrise, Timothy walked up a massive dune to rehearse. Alone. No crew, no director. Just him, the desert, and the wind. When Denis found him, he was sitting cross-legged, eyes closed, whispering his lines like a prayer. When asked what he was doing, he said, trying to feel the loneliness of a god in training. Yeah, dude was method. But filming Dune wasn't just grueling, it was transformative. It pushed him to his physical limits. It made him learn fight choreography, philosophy, diplomacy, even sandworm etiquette. He joked in one interview that by the end of filming, he could taste a storm coming by the air pressure in his eyebrows. When Dune finally premiered, the world roared. Critics were stunned. Audiences were hypnotized. And there, at the center of it all, was Timothy, commanding, tortured, magnetic. A boy caught between legacy and destiny. The internet exploded. Memes. Fan art. A subreddit dedicated entirely to his hair in the desert wind. He had arrived. But Timmy didn't stop there. No, he pivoted. Again. Right after Dune, he jumped into the French Dispatch, where he played a rebellious student revolutionary who read philosophy in bathtubs. Wes Anderson directed, so you know the aesthetic was full-blown pastel fever dream. Timmy delivered his lines like jazz, all rhythm and sharp wit, wearing impossibly high-waisted pants. It was absurd. It was art. It was very French. Then came Don't Look Up, an apocalyptic satire where he played a skateboarding stoner with a heart of gold. He wore a beanie. He said, yo, a lot. And yet, somehow, in the middle of that chaotic Comet Doomsday extravaganza, he delivered a line about love that made everyone clutch their chests. Leave it to Timmy to turn a joke into a heartbreak grenade. By this point, Timothée Chalamet wasn't just an actor. He was an idea. A walking contradiction. Soft and sharp, boyish and timeless, chaotic and intentional. You couldn't pin him down. One day he's quoting Camus at an awards show. The next, he's giggling on TikTok while trying to eat spicy wings. And just when everyone thought he might settle down, take a break, maybe buy a yacht or start a vineyard, he dropped a bombshell. He was going to play Willy Wonka. Yes, that Wonka. The top-hatted, candy-conjuring enigma who lives in a chocolate-coated fever dream. People were skeptical. Could Timmy sing? Could he dance? Could he fill the glittery shoes of Gene Wilder and somehow not become a meme? The answer was yes. And not just yes. Absolutely. He trained for months. Took vocal lessons. Worked with choreographers. January 5th, 2025, 2049. Learned how to flip a cane like it was an extension of his soul. He played Wonka not as a wacky eccentric, but as a young idealist with a dream and a suspicious amount of cocoa powder on his sleeves. When the movie dropped, kids loved it. Adults wept. Critics praised his balance of whimsy and sorrow. And his voice? Sweet and sad, like a lullaby in a candy shop. It was a reminder, this kid, this gangly boy from Hell's Kitchen with too many feelings and not enough sleep, had range. More range than anyone expected. He could do sci-fi, indie, satire, musicals, and he still hadn't peaked. Which brings us to a certain legend. A voice. A guitar. A hurricane wrapped in denim. Bob Dylan. January 5th, 2025, 2050. Now, stepping into the shoes of a literary, musical icon isn't easy. Especially not those shoes, mud-caked cowboy boots laced with protest and poetry. But that's exactly what Timothée signed up for. When the announcement dropped that he'd be playing Bob Dylan in the biopic A Complete Unknown, half the internet gasped. The other half rolled their eyes and typed things like, LOL okay, good luck with that, cheekbones. But Timmy? He didn't blink. He vanished. No, seriously, he disappeared for a while. No red carpets. No cryptic tweets. No surprise appearances at Fashion Week. Just gone. And where did he go? To Nashville. To Greenwich Village. To dusty basements and smoky studios. He studied Dylan like a scholar and a stalker had a baby. Every interview. Every album. Every bootleg concert recording with garbled harmonica solos. He didn't want to imitate Dylan. He wanted to understand him. To embody him. The rebellion. The loneliness. The genius. He took guitar lessons until his fingers bled. Learned how to play over 40 Dylan songs by memory. One night, he even showed up unannounced at a local folk open mic in New York and played Girl from the North Country. Nobody recognized him. Or if they did, they didn't believe it. Timothée Chalamet, in a flannel and trucker hat, crooning like he'd lived through 3 divorces and a war. And the voice? Oh, it wasn't perfect. At first, it was too pretty, too smooth. But then he cracked it, found the gravel, the edges. He sang with this strange, aching precision that didn't mimic Dylan. It haunted him. On set, it was the same story. He didn't just wear Dylan's clothes. He wore his posture. Hunched shoulders. Nervous eyes. That smirk that always seemed like it knew a secret you'd never hear. The director said Timmy had become a myth playing a myth. I mean, come on. That's some next-level praise. Filming A Complete Unknown took everything out of him. There were days when he didn't speak unless it was in character. Once, the makeup artist found him asleep in the corner of the dressing room, cradling a harmonica like it was a security blanket. But when the trailer dropped, the world lost its mind. He wasn't just playing Dylan. He was channeling something raw and feral and beautiful. Critics went feral. Boomers forgave him for wearing crop tops. Even Bob Dylan himself gave it a nod. Just a nod. But that's a whole damn standing ovation in Dylan speak. And then came the tour rumors. Oh, yes. You heard that right. See, Timothée didn't stop playing Dylan after the movie wrapped. He kept performing. Kept writing. There were whispers, unconfirmed, but juicy, that he might go on a small acoustic tour, as Dylan. A sort of musical seance. People called it method acting. I call it madness. Beautiful, dangerous madness. Now, somewhere in the middle of all this, the fashion world pulled him back in like a jealous ex. He became the face of Bleu de Chanel. The commercial looked like someone gave a French poet a budget and a drone. Black waves. Silhouettes. A slow turn. And Timothy whispering, "I am not the man you think I am." Half the population swooned. The other half wrote fanfiction. And then, because apparently reinventing yourself 3 times wasn't enough, he did something unthinkable. He took a break. Yeah, no movies, no campaigns, no interviews. For 6 full months, Timmy went dark. Word was he traveled. Alone. Some said he went back to France. Others claimed they spotted him in Japan, reading Murakami on a park bench. A few Instagram sleuths swore he was in Peru, hiking to Machu Picchu with nothing but a backpack and a copy of Rambo. Whatever the truth was, it was clear. He needed air. He needed space. When you've played gods and revolutionaries, sung your way through sugar factories, and sometimes you just need to sit still. And when he came back, he was different, quieter, sharper. The laugh was still there, but the edges had aged. Like he'd walked through fire and learned how to smile at the burn. January 5th, 2025, 2051. So when Timmy reemerged after his mysterious sabbatical, the world noticed. Not because he walked into a paparazzi pit or posted a shirtless selfie, though let's be honest, that would have done the trick. No, people noticed because he showed up, unannounced, at a film festival in Toronto. Alone. No entourage. No stylist. Just him. A scarf that looked like it had survived 3 French winters, and a manuscript. Yes, a manuscript. Apparently, during his break, he wrote a screenplay. A weird one. Rumored to be semi-autobiographical, whispered to be part romance, part psychological thriller, part love letter to cinema itself. Titled Glass House, it's centered on an actor who begins losing track of which parts of himself are real, and which are just the roles he's played. Yeah, real mirror inside a mirror stuff. The industry called it meta. I call it therapy with a camera. He pitched it in a single night. No studio. No agents. Just walked into a producer's after-party, scarf flapping in the wind like some gothic sea captain, handed over the script, and said, "I want to direct it." And here's the kicker, they said yes. Suddenly, Timothy wasn't just the actor anymore. He was the auteur. He cast unknowns in major roles, used natural lighting, and shot the entire film in sequence, which is basically the cinematic equivalent of tightrope walking blindfolded over a canyon with jazz music playing behind you. The shoot was chaos. Beautiful, sleepless chaos. He directed barefoot half the time. Had the actors lived together in a rented villa to build intimacy. Fed the crew croissants and black coffee every morning like a cult leader with a catering budget. And the scarf? It was there. Every single day. And yet, Glass House was good. Not just good. Devastating. Critics called it Lynchian with a heartbeat. One review said, it's like watching someone dissect their soul, frame by frame. But with every masterpiece comes a mess, and Timmy's came in the form of a leaked video. One night, weeks after the film's premiere, a clip surfaced online. A private moment, Timmy in a quiet bar in Paris, drunk, philosophical, talking to a friend. Nothing wild. Just human. He said something about not recognizing himself anymore, about being tired of being loved for pretending. The internet did what the internet does, dissected, overanalyzed, memed it to death. Some fans were worried. Others called him pretentious. A few armchair psychologists offered unsolicited diagnoses like they were handing out business cards. And for the first time in his career, Timothy didn't say anything. He vanished again. But this time, people weren't charmed. They were annoyed, demanding statements, clarifications, apologies for being sad, being mysterious. The line between celebrity and public property had blurred, and Timmy was caught in the middle of the fog. But then, just when the discourse was at its loudest, he surprised everyone. He showed up on Saturday Night Live, waltzed out, live, in front of millions, with a goofy grin and a skit about method acting that had him playing a lettuce leaf auditioning for The Bear. It was stupid. It was hilarious. It was him, reminding the world that behind the myth, the melancholy, the masterpiece, he was still just a weird, brilliant kid from Hell's Kitchen who loved to make people feel something. The audience roared. The internet melted. The scarf even made a cameo in one sketch. And after the show, someone asked him backstage, was all of this planned? The retreat, the film, the silence. He just shrugged, smirked, and said, sometimes you gotta get lost to figure out which version of yourself is worth playing. And then he winked. Classic. That chapter ended quietly. No blockbuster. No fashion campaign. Just a guy, a scarf, and a reawakened sense of self. But what came next? Oh, it's a curveball. A surprise no one saw coming. It involved love, scandal, a Vespa accident in Rome, and a woman named Isadora with a tattoo of a burning piano on her shoulder. January 5th, 2025, 2052. So here's the scene. Rome. Late spring. The kind of evening where the air smells like espresso and unresolved tension. Timothy was there supposedly scouting locations for a new indie project, a moody noir about silent cities and forgotten phone calls. But what he didn't expect was to be blindsided. Not by a film deal. Not by a paparazzi ambush. But by a Vespa. Well, technically, he was on the Vespa. What blindsided him was the woman he almost crashed into, Isadora. She wasn't famous. Not exactly. A sculptor by trade, she had this aura about her, like she lived half in reality and half in some smoky Parisian jazz bar from the 60s. The kind of woman who wore men's dress shirts like armor, quoted Cocteau casually, and smelled faintly of turpentine and sandalwood. Timmy was on the way to a dinner meeting. She was walking out of a gallery carrying a bust of Joan of Arc. Their collision was messy, loud, and weirdly cinematic. And just like that, boom, something clicked. He apologized. She laughed. He offered to buy her a drink to make up for nearly destroying her statue. She said only if he could name 3 Italian sculptors off the top of his head. He named one. Badly. She bought him the drink instead. Their first date wasn't even supposed to be a date. It was just wine on a balcony and arguing about whether Fellini was overrated. But something about it felt inevitable. Natural. He wasn't Timothée Chalamet, global icon. He was just Timmy, a kid with too much emotion and a perpetual sunburn on his. They were inseparable. Morning cappuccinos, midnight walks, spontaneous swims in the Tiber. She made him read aloud while she sculpted. He called her his reverse muse, the artist who inspired him to stop performing and start being. It was like a Wes Anderson film fell in love with a French New Wave movie and they ran off to make pasta together. But of course, the world doesn't let Timothée Chalamet disappear quietly. Not for long. A photo leaked. Grainy, from a distance, but unmistakable, the two of them kissing on the Spanish Steps at sunrise. Within hours, the internet lost its collective mind. Who is Isadora? Timmy's mystery sculptor girlfriend? New muse or summer fling? The speculation was relentless. Suddenly, Isadora's tiny art studio in Trastevere was swarmed. Journalists. Influencers. One guy dressed like a tree claiming to be a performance artist just to get close. She hated it. He hated that she hated it. And then came the worst of it, the headlines. Isadora's dark past, the artist who once set fire to a gallery in Paris. It was true, but not how they told it. Years ago, Isadora had made a controversial piece, a piano sculpted from wax and set aflame during an exhibit titled The Sound of Letting Go. It was a statement, a metaphor, but tabloids painted her as reckless, unstable. They twisted it, made her into a character, a cautionary tale. Timothy went quiet. Not because he was ashamed, because he didn't know how to protect her. This wasn't a movie. There was no script to fix it. But she handled it like a storm in heels. At a surprise gallery event in Rome, Isadora unveiled a new sculpture. A bust. Of Timothy. But not polished. Not glamorous. Rough. Honest. Cracked in places and left that way. The plaque beneath it read, "For the boy who thinks too loudly." Timmy cried. In public. Hugged her. Kissed her forehead. And whispered something the press couldn't catch. After that, things changed. Quietly. He stayed in Rome longer. Turned down 2 major film offers. Walked the streets hand in hand with Isadora like he wasn't the subject of 10,000 Google alerts. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't acting. He was just existing. But as always, the quiet wouldn't last. Something else was coming. A project bigger than anything he'd ever done. Something dangerous. Risky. Uncharted. And it would test not only his talent, but his heart. January 5th, 2025, 2053. So let's fast forward a bit. Rome was golden. Isadora was the calm after the storm. But eventually, the world came knocking again, louder this time. Hollywood doesn't like loose ends. And Timothy? He was the biggest one. See, while he was gallivanting through cobbled streets and sipping red wine with a sculptor who smelled like citrus and danger, a project had been circling him like a hawk. Something massive. Something Shakespearean. Word was, a new adaptation of Hamlet was in development. Not the dusty, corseted kind, either. This one was modern, brutal, bleeding. Set in a post-collapse world where Denmark was a corporate oligarchy and Elsinore was a crumbling glass tower. Think neon swords, cyberdread, soliloquies against digital ghosts. They wanted Timmy as Hamlet. And at first, he said no. Too much pressure. Too many expectations. Too close to home. The themes, grief, madness, betrayal, were a little too relevant. He wasn't sure he could survive playing a man who couldn't decide whether to die or destroy everything. But then Isadora said something one night, and that way only she could, sharp, casual, honest. Maybe you should stop avoiding the roles that scare you. Maybe that's the version of yourself you're still trying to meet. He took the part. Rehearsals were intense. He worked with movement coaches, voice coaches, even a fencing master who said Timmy had the reflexes of a caffeinated cat and the poise of a flamingo in a hurricane. High praise, I guess. The script was brutal. The director? A visionary with the temperament of a volcano. He demanded everything, rage, vulnerability, madness, but with silence. No big emotional outbursts. Just the slow drowning of a soul. Every glance had to hurt. Every pause had to bleed. Timothy threw himself in. For 3 months, he lived like Hamlet. Slept 4 hours a night. Ate only fruit and fish. Spoke in iambic pentameter without realizing it. There's even a story that one day, in the middle of rehearsal, he collapsed, not from exhaustion, but because, in his words, grief got too loud. But when the play opened, It was transcendent. Audiences sat in stunned silence. No applause for a full minute. Just breathing. Processing. One critic wrote, Chalamet's Hamlet is less a performance than an unraveling. Watching him feels like overhearing a man trying not to break inside his own skin. The world agreed. He was nominated for every major award. Again. But this time, it felt different. Not celebratory, vindicating. Like all the weirdness, the loneliness, the scarf-wrapped spiral of his 20s had led here. Isadora was there, of course. Front row. She didn't clap. She stood. But then came the interview. A big, live one. With a journalist known for getting under people's skin like a scalpel. Timmy was doing okay, talking about the process, the play, the poetry, when the host casually dropped the bomb. So, Timothy, do you ever worry you've become more myth than man? The room went still. He blinked, swallowed, then leaned in and said, sometimes. But I think the myth is just the costume. The man's what's underneath, trying to remember how to walk without it. Silence. Then the host asked if he ever thought about quitting, about just walking away. He looked into the camera, smiled softly, and said, every day. But I also think about how lonely I'd be without stories. Even the painful ones. That interview went viral. Again. But this time, something felt different. The tone shifted. Less obsession, more reverence. The internet didn't just adore Timmy, they understood him now. Or at least, they stopped trying to box him in. And then came the twist. A package. Delivered to his Paris apartment. No return address. Inside, a script. Untitled. Handwritten. Just 2 words on the front page. Play yourself. No one knows who sent it. Not even him. But the story? Oh, it would take him somewhere he swore he'd never go. Somewhere buried in memory. Somewhere with one last truth waiting to be unearthed. January 5th, 2025, 2054. So let's pick up with that script. The one with no title. No author. Just 2 cryptic words. Play yourself. At first, Timothy thought it was a prank. Maybe an overly philosophical fan. Maybe a screenwriter with delusions of mystique. But as he flipped through the pages, something strange happened. The words, they were his. Not literally, but emotionally. Scenes lifted from his childhood. Snippets of dialogue that felt too familiar. Characters who walked and talked like ghosts from his past. There was a boy named Theo. Sensitive. Torn between worlds. Half artist, half mirror. A mother who danced even when no one was watching. A father who spoke in footnotes in silence. And a city, New York, cold and vibrant, like a memory you never stopped chewing on. It was autobiographical, but not written by him. The more he read, the more unsettled he felt. Until he reached the final page. The final line. Scrawled in quick, almost careless handwriting. You won't be free until you see yourself from the outside, and forgive the boy who got you here. And beneath that, a small pressed flower. A violet. His mother used to keep violets on the windowsill when he was little. Said they were quiet things that survive anyway. Timothy didn't call his agent. Didn't run it by a manager or publicist. He just said yes. To the script. To the idea. To the chance. The project began small. Independently funded. Shot on 16mm film. No sets, just real places. His old apartment in Hell's Kitchen. The stoop where he once kissed a girl who never called him back. The schoolyard where he first said a line on stage and felt the world tilt just a little in his favor. He cast himself, but only barely. Half the film was improvised. Sometimes he didn't even know the camera was rolling. Just lived. Just remembered. Isadora came on as art director. Sculpted the set pieces. Made sure everything looked exactly like his memories, but slightly off. Because that's what memory does, right? It distorts. It smooths. It forgets what hurt too much and sharpens the moments that made us who we are. When the film premiered, no red carpet, no sponsors, just a single, dusty art house theater in Brooklyn. People didn't know what to expect. What they got was silence. Then tears. Then something bigger than applause. Because Play Yourself wasn't a movie. It was a confession. It was a boy letting go. A man stepping forward. A myth unwrapping himself, layer by layer, until all that was left was truth. Critics called it too raw. Some said it was indulgent. One review said it was like watching someone bleed beautifully on screen for 90 minutes. But most people didn't care about the reviews. They just felt it. And when it was over, when the lights came up, Timothy stood at the back of the room. No scarf. No sunglasses. Just a hoodie, and those wide, tired, luminous eyes. He smiled, bowed, and whispered to someone nearby. That's the last role I'll ever need to play. He didn't disappear after that. No dramatic exits. No press tour retirement speeches. He still acted, sure, but differently. Lighter. Not chasing ghosts or approval. Just telling stories. Laughing more. Sleeping in. Taking Isadora to flea markets on weekends and making her pasta while quoting Shakespeare in an Italian accent so bad, the neighbors complained. Timothée Chalamet didn't fade away. He arrived. Finally. Not at a premiere or a headline, but in himself. And that, my friends, is how the boy who once cried into a peach became the man who stopped pretending. The end.